Welcome to episode 2 of season 10 of Talking Time with Caffeine. My guests are still running late here, but first of all, y'all know him, y'all love him, unless you hate him. Introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Jackson Wheat. I run a YouTube channel, which is just Jackson Wheat, where I teach concepts in evolutionary biology and zoology predominantly, and sometimes I'll do interviews or guest appearances, things like that.
Right. Hey, RJ, Jackson wants to know if you're coming in. You thought you were. If your internet can handle it, come on in. If not,
Yeah, RJ, get in here. If you're listening, the internet works. We know they're putting fresh batteries in his PowerPoint. RJ, come on in here. Get in here. So today we're talking about monotremes.
yes, our most distant cousin that can still be considered a mammal.
Yeah, they're strange mammals, but they meet all the criteria for mammals, and so I guess I will screen share for the PowerPoint. I'll stick here in the. Oh, RJ, I was hoping you'd be in here. I thought you were.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people think when they think of mammals, they think of live births, but that's not necessarily the case.
Exactly right. Because technically, the definition of a mammal is having fur or hair, lactomammaries, and I think I stopped sharing. It's having hair, fur, lactomammaries, and 3 middle ear bones. Those are the definitive traits for being a mammal, not necessarily giving live birth, because, as we shall see, not all mammals give live birth, and that is especially the case for a lot of fossil mammals. Let me try that again. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so we're going to talk about monotremes. So monotreme, the word itself, mono, means one, and treme refers means one opening. And this refers to the fact that they have a cloaca, which is their single opening for urinary, digestive, and reproductive tracts. And that's also the case for birds, reptiles, and amphibians. And so, of course, the since mammals are derived from reptiles, it makes sense that the early mammals would also have a cloaca. And so this condition of having a single opening for these different bodily systems, this was changed, but only relatively recently. So after the split between monotremes and the marsupials and placental mammals, the marsupials and placentals are collectively called therians, and theria just means mammal, and so eutheria means or I think theria technically means beast, if I remember correctly. And then eutheria, which is just the placental mammals, means the true beasts.
Yeah, that's not including the marsupials are more closer cousins.
Right, exactly. So this character state is only changed for the therians. They have separate exits for the urinary and digestive tracts, and we'll actually talk about the developmental biology of that in a moment. It's very interesting. So here's the. I mean, we'll see a picture of it. We're going to talk about it right now. So actually, during the ontogeny, that is the development from an embryo to a fetus to being born, the separation of that single tract into two is replayed. So you can sort of think back to that whole ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny idea, which Haeckel had, which was wrong. Broadly speaking, it was wrong or is wrong. Organisms don't display the adult, or they don't go through the adult character states for their ancestors. It's more like they go through the embryological stages of their ancestors, which is what von Baer proposed, who was sort of the opponent to Haeckel. And of course, von Baer was more correct. I mean, he had some incorrect ideas too regarding embryology, but he was more right than Haeckel was, and that sort of led to kind of the modern idea of like the phylotypic stage, why all the vertebrates have very similar embryos. And again, that's kind of a topic for another time because there's a lot of variation that goes into that as well. But just broadly speaking, and we'll look at a picture of it in a moment. So the penis, which the males have, of course, and also lots of reptiles have penises, it's just used for reproduction. Is only the exit in males for the reproductive system, not for the urinary system as it is in therians. And then, to continue with, we're talking, everything's gross right now, so we'll continue with that. So as for the other side of that, are we getting comments? Did we get any comments? No? Okay.
This except for this one.
Oh, what do they say?
This little mammal reminds me of a lot of a porcupine for some odd reason.
Oh, yes. Version. Yeah, we'll get to that in a sec. Yeah. We'll talk about the echidna in a moment, or in a little bit. So milk. So they have lactomammaries, as all mammals do, but monotremes don't have nipples. The babies don't suckle from nipples. They basically the mother excretes milk from these. I mean, the lactomammaries, the glands that produce milk, they're just essentially modified sweat glands. You're sweating milk through a particular pore, basically. And with these guys, what you're doing is they are secreting it kind of through their skin rather than through one particular opening. And so you might think, well, since these guys are so primitive compared to the other mammals, maybe having the milk pads was the ancestral state and having a nipple is the derived state. Well, interestingly, mammals did actually originally have nipples, but they became lactal pads in the monotremes later. So this is secondarily derived, not the primitive state.
I do have a question though.
Yes.
On your fourth point, it says the penis is only used for reproduction. Is it used for other things in other animals or something?
Yeah, I mean, we use ours as the exit for our urinary tract.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, the monotremes don't use the penis as the exit for the urinary tract. They just use it for reproduction.
Okay, I thought thinking like maybe like a weapon or something.
Like penis fencing or something, which does happen in sea slugs. Sea slugs, which are hermaphrodites, will actually fence with their penises. They're like swords, and they'll just stab each other repeatedly until one or both of them are inseminated, and then they leave.
Something to get to talk about if you ever get to that clade of animals.
Yeah. Cyphopteron quadrispinosum was one of the first examples. No. Talking to my cat. Was one of the first examples of penis fencing I read about. And there was a paper that was like traumatic mating is what it was called. So, all right. Are we good on this slide, or are we ready for the next one?
Just look at the cloak. Yeah, that's on those animals plus the reptiles and birds. That's where it all comes out at one slot, right? The babies, the poop, the pee, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, it's all just this one, and it's the same. I mean, fish also have, just the one exit for reproductive and digestive tracts.
So that like on the animals, the other animals besides the mammals, the live birds, like some snakes, some frogs, some fish.
Correct.
Like the ichthyosaurs and stuff, the marine reptiles, they give birth through that thing.
Yes. Yeah. You're right. So interestingly, switching back and forth between laying eggs and giving live birth is apparently not that hard, because lots and lots and lots of different lineages have done it. And some have even switched, back again. Like they may have been egg layers originally, then switch to placenta, and then switch back to egg laying. They just go back and forth because for whatever reason it's not that difficult to do. And so I think that's kind of interesting. But yeah, ichthyosaurs, there are fish that give live birth, like sharks and give live birth, or I think some sharks give live birth, not all of them per se. Many of them lay like mermaids' purses and that sort of stuff. There are lots of snakes that do it, and yeah, you mentioned frogs. Some frogs, they basically skip the tadpole stage; they go straight to froglet, and that's how you're able to skip laying eggs. Is they basically direct develop. I talked a little bit about that in a video I did for Prophet of Zod once. I don't remember the title of the video, but I made a guest appearance over there, and that was fun.
If I can find it, I'll put up a what's it called, a card up above right now for that.
Gotcha. Yeah, it wasn't super long ago. Maybe it was like in February, something like that. Anyways, alrighty.
February's not a year ago at this point, almost.
Oh, you're right. It was. Yeah, you're right. It was about a year ago. All right, we ready for the next one?
Yes.
Okay, so sort of building off what I was talking about with the ontogeny. So picture A here. This is. So you have the anus, which is down here at the bottom. So that's the exit for both your digestive and then you see it says urinary bladder. So your digestive and urinary tracts. So they both exit there. This is early in your development, your ontogeny. And then you see this divide starting to happen. Metanephros and ureter. I believe that. So I think the metanephros is the start of the kidney development. I think that's like the bud of the kidney sort of beginning. And you see by part C, this divide is really started, and then it's complete, or is really happening. And then by D, it is complete, and you have two completely separate urinary and digestive tracts. So really interesting to think about that they were just one, and then over time they got continually separated until now we have these two exits, and the whole thing is replayed as we develop. There are some other interesting little bits like that replay as we develop. Like for instance, what is it, like part of our jaws ossify in the manner that it occurred in like the synapsids, earlier synapsids.
Okay.
Whales also will develop like their limb buds and then they recede. Stuff like that happens. So whales develop teeth that recede. I think snakes also develop like little limb buds that then recede. So yeah. I just thought that was really cool.
So is that like when they're developing in the womb right there, or
yes,
the stages? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and so
I was sure if it was that was developing the womb stages, or those were like the transitional fossil stages. Well, I realized we can't have transitional fossils of organs, can you?
Yeah, I don't know if this. I'm not sure if this would have played out exactly this way in animal evolution, because the kidneys were already around. So I don't know if it would have played out exactly this way, but this is how it happens in development. You see this original position, and then the highly derived position at the very end. So, all right, are we good on that? We ready for the next one?
I believe so.
Okay, and then I'm gonna make this one large so that we can sort of zoom in here, because I understand or realize some of the words are tiny. Okay, so all right, so at the very top we have early mammal, or not even mammals, they're mammalia forms.
Oh,
so they're outside the mammals. So the purple and the blue up there, those are mammalia forms. They're very, very close to being mammals, but not quite there yet.
Oh, I see some of them got the gliding gene too way back then too.
Oh, okay. So that's the thing. Volaticotherium may be a glider, may not be. There's been a lot of debate on that, and it's not settled. There are hints that maybe Volaticotherium was a glider, but that arboreal lifestyle is not known for certain. I'll say that there have been debates about that. Yeah, if you look at the very top, like Thernaxodon, Probanignathus, those are still the like double hinge jaw joint guys. So we don't have quite the total single mammalian jaw joint yet.
Oh, but they're past the Therapsid and Cyanodont stages just by this point.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's like in the cyanodonts, the purple at least, because you're in the early Triassic, Triassic, and then you have the last common ancestor of mammals sometime in the early Jurassic, and so the true mammals, you have the green, which are the monotremes and their relatives, which were previously called the prototheres or prototherians. They're now called the Australosphenidans. I don't really know what the exact cladistic difference is, but we're just going with this for the sake of argument. So basically, from green downward, those are all true mammals. And so there used to be more monotremes than their relatives, but they have mostly been outcompeted.
Yeah, I guess carrying your baby for longer than laying an egg is, I guess that's more of a benefit, I guess, where that most of them are living.
Yeah, it certainly could be. For whatever reason, I don't know what the exact gestation time is for monotremes and marsupials. Um, but yeah, so I think it's probably less to do with the reproductive time per se, because I think they give birth sooner.
Yeah, they do.
But they're probably less developed when they're born, as opposed to a lot of placental mammals. So
Like
what I
like
would
yeah, like most. I think we're the only ones that they can't walk around when we're born. I think most other placental mammals can for the most part, except for whales. They can swim around.
yeah, a lot of them can. They're what is it, altricial, I think, or precocial. Sorry, they're precocial. We are altricial. That means that they can walk basically right after they're born. And then this yellow group here, those guys are all extinct. Let's see, like Raphinomammus. Raphinomammus is actually a very interesting fossil. That's that really kind of chunky guy, up there by kind of by the green line. And Raphinomammus was actually found to have Psittacosaurus offspring in its gut when it died. So
I don't know if this is later in your thing or but was it just coincidence that both the monotremes and the marsupials all ended up in the same area? Their journeys took them to the same Australia type area, except for the possum. That is, this is America.
we will talk about the biogeography momentarily.
Okay.
Yeah, that's on the next slide. Then of course down there in the red, those are the eutherians, and including the placental mammals, and then the blue guys down at the bottom are the marsupials. So there you go. So the really weird, or the features that made people think in the 1800s that the platypus was just a hoax, they're actually very normal for early mammals, like laying eggs. That's a completely normal character for early mammals. We just don't
For
consider
all
that
mammals
because
until we split off from the egg layers.
right, exactly. All mammals laid eggs until like the Jurassic, basically. And so for a while, that was not only the norm, it was the only. And then it wasn't until later when giving live birth became the norm, and then we just happened to have come about in that world.
Yeah.
And so it was really weird for people to sort of rediscover the platypus, and they're like, wow, this is weird. So anything else on this one?
I can't think of anything. If my chat has anything to talk about, they can bring it up. But I think I'm good for this slide.
Okay. All right. So biogeography. So you raised a good question. You're always predicting my slides. Um, so actually, all of the monotreme fossils, I guess the core monotremes, come from either like very southern South America or Antarctica or Australia, which makes sense because these continents were all part of Gondwana in the Cretaceous, and so marsupials, yeah, both marsupials and monotremes kind of ended up in South America and then made their way across Antarctica into Australia. That might not be a coincidence. I mean, so here's the thing about that though, is it's not like there were no placental mammals in South America while it was isolated. There were notoungulates, for instance. They were in South America like the whole Cenozoic, pretty much. Marsupials took on lots of different forms. There were some like big carnivores like Thylacosmilus in South America, and then in Australia there was like Thylacaleo, the marsupial lion. So yeah, there were some pretty serious marsupial predators for a long time. So I don't know what precise evolutionary pressure, caused their downfall per se, but they were pretty much totally restricted to Gondwana. That's where they survived, and that's where they continue to survive today. Echidnas and the platypus, because there are 4 species of echidna, they're only found in like New Guinea and Australia. And there's a very famous dividing point between Asia and or between basically the Asian fauna and the Australian fauna. Do you know what that dividing line is called?
I think I've heard of it before. I can't think the name of it though.
Yeah, you probably have. It's called Wallace's line, named after Alfred Russel Wallace, who was the co-discoverer of natural selection. So while Darwin was discovering or was studying finches in the Galapagos, but technically he didn't know they were finches at the time, Wallace was studying the fauna of New Guinea and Java and Sumatra, what they call the Malaysian archipelago. And so Wallace was studying the animals there, and he was kind of like, it's weird that there are like marsupials and monotremes in New Guinea, but there are apes and tigers and elephants in Sumatra. What's up with that? And so he kind of elucidated that. And of course, it wasn't until plate tectonics came along that researchers sort of made sense of all that.
The live birth people went what continental drift, and the egg layers went the other way.
Yeah, basically that's basically it's more like Australia, as you can see here. It's like, so it kind of separated from Antarctica, so that was all of Gondwana, and it shifted northwards. And so as it shifted northwards, got closer and closer to the Laurasian fauna and the Afrotherian fauna, which was in Asia. But there are some really deep bodies of water between these different islands, and so probably has discouraged crossing events.
All right.
Are we good on this one?
I think so.
Oh, also, I guess one other thing I can draw your attention to is, you see Monotrematum and Obdurodon, they look like the platypus, like the modern platypus, which is Ornithorhynchus. So the platypus is kind of a living fossil in a sense.
Okay.
It looks a lot like the ancient monotremes. The echidna is very derived, but the platypus looks a lot more like the ancient monotremes.
So, question that doesn't remember quite these things. Are these like extinct cousins of the platypus, or they're like, what's the word?
Yeah.
Like the transitional fossils of the platypus?
I mean, all transitional fossils are cousins
True,
of
true.
others. So
Because since we can't know until we get until we get some DNA fossils, we can't really know for certain which ones are ancestors, which ones are
right,
extant versions.
right, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, in a sense, you could say these are like transitional platypuses, but they kind of look a lot like the modern platypus. So all right. And then extant taxa. So, like I said, there are 4 species of echidnas, and they look kind of like little porcupines. It's probably a defensive mechanism. They can also ball up, sort of like armadillos. They have these big claws for digging, for like insects, and they have a long tongue, which they can also use to catch insects. So, sort of like an anteater.
So these are both. So both these both these are insectivores.
Um, yeah, sort of. I mean, the platypus eats like little freshwater invertebrates, not necessarily insects per se, like crawfish, things like that,
Okay.
little lobsters. And then, which will, of course, also it does include insects. And then the echidna, yeah. So both eat lots of little arthropods.
So there's no herbivore, at least in living terms, no herbivore monotremes then.
No, no, yeah, they're both insectivores. Um, a couple features I want to draw your attention to. So one thing people call the platypus the duck-billed platypus. Well, so there's kind of a problem with that. It's the and actually, well, I'll tell you about this creationist. You probably know about it, but your audience may not. I'll talk about that in a moment. So the thing about the platypus is part of the reason that naturalists or that people in general in the 1800s thought that it was a fake when it was first brought from Australia is, I mean, look at it. It looks weird. It looks like it has a duck bill and webbed feet like a duck. It's got a beaver tail. It doesn't make any sense, right? And it lays eggs. I mean, what's up with that? It's basically a bird mammal hybrid, right? But of course,
Yeah,
as we mentioned,
yeah. Which be a point that I used to think a long time ago. I back before I knew more about this cladistics and phonology and stuff. I
mm-hmm.
used to actually think that birds were more related to mammals than other animals because of the platypus.
Yeah. Well, but yeah, both birds and mammals are descended from egg-laying mammals, and so these guys are just doing what all of our ancestors did. They're still just laying eggs like normal. The web feet, which only the platypus have, the echidnas, they don't really. I think echidnas can swim, but they really don't do it that much. If you look at the feet, the webbed feet of the platypus, you notice the toes don't go all the way to the end of the webbing. The webbing extends way beyond the toes, and so it's not really like a duck's webbing, because duck feet, the toes really do go to the end. There are actually claws on the end of the duck's toes. So it's only this superficial sort of resemblance, because of course having this webbing creates this pad so you can get more thrust as you swim through the water. Same with the tail.
So so back to one episode we did last year. Is this like almost like a transition to going to the full time the water almost? Because it looks like the platypus don't looks like now the platypus wouldn't walk very well on land that well.
I mean, sure, yeah, and it's very adapted for a life of searching for aquatic invertebrates in the mud. So yeah, it's very well adapted for that. I mean, whales also went through a period where their tail was kind of like a beaver, a beaver's.
Mm.
And again, the reason for that is it helps get thrust. You have this big flat tail, and you push, and it gives you a big thrust through the water. And so, yeah, they're getting pushed both from their tail and from their flippers, or their hands, their little. I guess you could call them flippers. What I'm talking about. Their webbed hands. So yeah, they're very well adapted for semi-aquatic life. And I think their fur is pretty thick too, so it also helps insulate them.
Yeah.
And of course the big feature that people talk about is, and what people call them for is their bill. It's a duck's bill, except it's not a duck's bill. It's really
Totally
not
different-
at all like a duck's bill.
made totally different materials.
Exactly. It is made of totally different material. It's made from fleshy skin rather than hard keratin like a duck. Also, the way that the mouth opens from the bottom. It well, let me rephrase that. Duck beaks are two separate pieces. So like when they open their mouth, both pieces separate. That's not what happens here. It's like the bottom jaw is like is like part of the bill rather than being a separate piece of the bill. So yeah, totally separate material, totally different mechanism of opening. So it really just looks superficially similar, but also the bill, the duck bill, or the platypus bill, is full of electroreceptors. And biologists have sort of figured out that the platypus uses most of its brain power for interpreting those electroreceptor signals. Now, interestingly, the echidna, you can see his little bill also. He also has electroreceptors in there. They're not nearly as great as the platypuses, but he does also have them. So,
All right.
But yeah, so, and then of course there's only one species of platypus, and so okay, so I'll tell you the story about the creationists. So a while back, I guess that was 2 years ago now, good lord. I'm getting too old for this now. There was a creationist that we were sparring with on my channel. His name was Long Story Short.
Oh,
This
I
guy-
remember that series.
Yeah, so this guy, for your audience, so he worked for the Discovery Institute. I think he still works for them. He still puts out videos for them, and they're well animated, but they're very terrible informationally. So we had a series of back and forths with him, and he says that the idea of the nested hierarchy of animals or of life generally is just it's not real. It's not true. And he's like, oh, there are so many examples of organisms that don't conform to the nested hierarchy. Now, the funny thing is, if you look at genes, there are lots of different ways that genes will not conform perfectly to a nested hierarchy. And in fact, my next video will discuss that a little bit. But by and large, for animals at least, or for eukaryotes, most of them do conform to the nest, or they do conform pretty much entirely to the nested hierarchy. And you can look at their genes to confirm that. Well, so we asked him, give us an example in your mind of an organism that doesn't conform to the nested hierarchy. And his response, no joke, was the platypus. Like, this is still the 1800s, and it's a chimeric animal. And he seriously defended that, like, the platypus is like an actual chimera. And it was stupid. And people watched that video, and in the comment section, they're like, wow, what a great argument he made. Oh, it was just so dumb. It was so hilariously. There were so many things he said that were hilariously dumb. And yet he's well respected by the Discovery Institute, which just goes to show you it's not about facts. It's about feels over reels. So, at any rate, I won't give him any more of my time or our time. So, all right. Do we have questions from the audience?
Well, that's all? All the slides?
Yeah, I mean, there aren't really a whole lot of...
Okay. I do have a question. I do have a question, though. Where was that platypus's top hat?
Exactly. Where's his little, his like bowler hat or whatever? Agent P. There was a video, I think it may have been on TikTok. My sister showed me where the voice actor for Dr. Doofenshmirtz was sent he was sent like a drawing of a platypus. He said, "Oh, look, it's a cute little platypus." And then like the next one, it's a platypus with the little agent hat. He's like, "Oh, Perry the platypus."
But yeah. Oh,
what a great show! What a
Anybody,
great show.
so anybody have any questions that are watching right now?
RJ, do you have any? Is RJ still with us? Is he still there?
It's he had 2 comments. First comment was this.
I suspect they were specialists in rare niches, while the more diverse but ultimately extinct dominant late therapsids got favored in the fossil preservation game. That's probably true. That's probably true. And that electroreceptor wiring hogs space above the jaw, resulting in tendency for toothlessness. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's probably why they are insectivores. No bones because they're toothless, and so it's just a matter of crushing arthropods with that beak. So yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a picture. I think it's it's in the Ancestor's Tale, and there have been other pictures of it, like a little homunculus of how much space of the brain is taken up for the electroreception. It's the vast majority of it. It's a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You brought up your next video talking about the hierarchies and stuff. Would that be the Bonobos Tale? That your next video?
Absolutely correct. That is the Bonobos Tale. Yeah, we're going to talk about. I guess I can tell you what we've already talked about. I won't spoil it for you.
Yeah.
But in the last video, the chimpanzee's tale, we mentioned sort of in passing at the very end that about a third of the gorilla's genes are either more similar to chimps or bonobos or humans than to the others. How could that be possible? Well, you're going to find out how that's possible in the next video. It'll be very fun. The script is done for it, or for my end is done. It's getting edited by all our favorite people, RJ, Erica, Nestlig, and then it's just a matter of recording at that point. So,
now you bring this up, but I've said this too, that we don't have to worry about that much because we have with the placentals we get the nutrients right from our mommy. But even with monotremes, their yolk sac is extremely small. That's why they're born quickly.
Yes, yeah, you're right. There was this loss, this reduction in the yolk sac, and so yeah, theirs is pretty small. So like birds and reptiles, the egg divides along like the yolk sac. It goes through meriblastic division instead of holoblastic division, like what placental mammals do and marsupials. And so it's because by the time you get to us, the egg sac is so reduced it doesn't even really function anymore. And we do still have the broken genes, the pseudogenes for what is it, vitellogen, I think, which is one of the proteins in the yolk sac. So we still have the remnants of our reptilian ancestry in us.
But it's just by this point it's just useless. This is useless.
Yeah, exactly. It's a fossil.
Would that be considered a what's that word? God, I can't remember the word now. But like the tailbone and
vestigial.
Yeah, that's the word.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, it's vestigial. It's the technical genetic term for it is a pseudogene because it's no longer functional. But yeah, it's vestigial. I think vestigial usually applies more to like morphological structures rather than like genes. But yeah,
Okay.
it's still, yeah, it's because it's so reduced that it's basically reduced to nothing essentially.
I like to see creations come up with a like that's still useful. It's just the blah 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 thing, like they do with the whale legs.
Yeah, the vitellogen thing. I'm trying to remember. I think their argument with that is like, oh well, you don't know if it's being used for something else. Yeah, we do. You can test it on tissues. We know it's not being used. It's a pseudogene. Get over it. Move on. Which is funny because like the problem with creationist arguments is they don't think them through. The genetic entropy necessitates that genes are being lost, right? If our genome is degrading, we're losing genes or alleles or something,
Yeah.
but they're like, we're losing stuff. What stuff? What are we losing? Well, they don't really tell you because they don't have a model.
But Jackson, if we're losing something, that's not evolution.
Right. Yeah. It's not evolution and it's not genetic entropy. It's just happening, I guess.
Yeah, I think someone said once it's more of a balance. If like egg laying was more important than whatever that natural selection type thing, whatever needs more energy or less energy or something like that, I forget which way it went. It's more productive or more required. I forget what the word I'm talking about is. The other thing is, and the other one loses the ability while the other one gains more abilities.
Right. You're absolutely correct. Yeah. So a major part of evolution, which we tried to explain to Bread of Life, Dapper and I did not too long ago, is that evolution's not all about gain. And in fact, a lot of evolution involves losses. And so, in essence, as you said, as you pointed out, when you want to make one feature more prominent, you have to make other features less prominent. By contrast, you have to basically give up. You have to redistribute your energy and your metabolism to allow for this feature at the cost of others. And so that happens. Yeah, that's extremely common in evolution. That's how we get different features. And creationists, will say, "Oh, well, since it's loss, it's not evolution," which isn't true. Adaptation requires loss a lot of times. Parasites, for instance, the more adapted a parasite is for a particular host, typically the more they lose. So in some cases, you have like parasites which have lost their whole nervous systems. Right, that's happened with certain Nidarians and with certain barnacles. I think a couple of different groups of barnacles have like gone parasitic and they've lost their nervous system. There is there's a Nidarian that lost its like mitochondrial genome, which is pretty crazy. So it doesn't even do aerobic respiration.
So like they can't even function unless they're on a host. Then at this point,
yeah, exactly. They just have no way to function except by sucking the life out of the host. Yeah, adaptive evolution does not necessarily involve getting more complex. It's always a trade-off.
Yeah, I think I forget where it is, but somebody made a point of this in another video. Is some engineers says if stuff was designed, it would be less complex, not more complex, because engineers like less stuff that like engineers like simple designs, not complicated designs.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the hallmark of design is simplicity, not complexity. You make a house using the fewest parts. You make a computer using the fewest parts. That you don't jerry rig, a computer from an iPad, but that's what we have with evolution is this constant jerry rigging of different pathways, like we saw with the urinary and digestive tracts earlier and the reproductive tracts. Like we start with one that has to separate into multiple tracts. Why make it that way? Why not just make them as separate tracks, right? And so, it's ridiculous. About half of us humans have gained adaptive range by losing the bitter taste reflex that enabled us to eat green veggies. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly, RJ.
Yeah. Also, you brought this up before the cord of that giraffe cord. That what's it?
The recurrent laryngeal nerve. Yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't think about this earlier. But Dapper brought up a point about that. If the giraffe had it bad, what about the sauropods?
Yeah, I think a paper did it on. I think it was Supersaurus, which is one of the longest diplodocoids known, and it would have had a laryngeal nerve of 92 feet. 92 feet, because it had to go from the brain all the way down to the heart, then all the way back up the neck. So that's like a 45-foot neck in both directions. Well, 46-foot neck in both directions. So yeah, that's an insanely long nerve for what? To
All because
go like what, a few inches? You know?
because our vertebrate ancestor had to have it wrapped around the heart.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it goes. You would only need it to go like 7 inches, something like that in humans, I think, which wouldn't be super long. And creationists really don't have any argument against this. They say, well, that's the way it develops in as in your embryonic development. Well, like, yeah, that is the way it develops, yes, but why? Why is that the way?
Because our common designer designed it that way.
It's like it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be
our designer
super long.
Our designer wanted to wrap around our heart and go 20 feet.
I guess. I guess so. Yeah. It's many times longer than it needs to be, simply because it would be maladaptive to try to break that root.
So again, I know we can't look at much. Can we look inside eggs, fossilized eggs, and see what was inside them, or not?
That depends. There was actually a theropod discovered recently that was like an embryonic theropod, or I think it was an oviraptor. I don't know if you saw the press release on that. So yeah, sometimes if they're very, very well preserved, we can look in a few, but not super often.
Because I know somewhere in our mammal ancestry, because both us and the monotremes have reduced yolk sacs. I just wonder if we could figure out where in that line between synapsids and the mammals that the yolk started to disintegrate or disappear.
I would be very surprised if we could find that. I think it'd be cool, but I'd be very surprised to find it. Not saying it's impossible, though.
Yeah. Like I said, that's the one thing I wish we could do with especially with the discovery of the quote blood cells quote.
Right. Yeah.
That they say is fresh, but we know it's not. That we could get DNA from it that could actually compare. Get more of a more accurate biology, but DNA isn't that eligible for keeping around.
If you remember from the proteins, the collagen that they sampled from that T-Rex, it was very similar to avian collagen because, of course, birds are dinosaurs, right?
We all knew that. At least we knew that.
Right, and that's part of the thing that the creationists won't talk about. They just literally won't talk about it. Like, oh, it got preserved. Yeah, what was it most similar to? Birds. That's weird. I wonder why that is. No, they don't. They say it got preserved. End of story. Therefore, creation, because creationists don't care about they don't care about the facts. They just care about the narrative.
Because the iron couldn't have preserved it for 65 million years, give or take. It's because it's a lot younger than we think it is.
Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing is, I read in preparation for a video I did on Paul Pelagia's channel, also with Dapper Dinosaur. I read this paper by these creationists where they said no serious challenges have been made to the iron preservation hypothesis. So these creationists will admit in the regular scientific literature that the iron preservation hypothesis works. And then they turn around and tell the other creationists, oh, no, it doesn't work. It's not true. Don't believe it. And it's like, whose side are you on? Like, what's happening here? Is this it's one of those things where it's like, at some point you just kind of wonder how much of it is a grift,
It's the same thing with the bare monology, really. Is they don't believe in evolution, but they have to save some evolution because too many people none of animals on the ark type of thing.
Yeah, well, so I feel kind of differently for like Todd Wood and Kurt Wise. And the reason I feel differently for them is it really does seem like they're trying Like they are actually struggling to deal with the fact that they can't just divide everything into nice little subsets. And they'll admit that. They're like, yep, Australopithecus sediba is in the humankind. And they know the other creationists hate that. And they're like, look, it's what the data says. And you gotta feel for them, you know? You gotta feel for them.
I guess I had to say that they're the people that they're the ancestors that didn't get on the ark, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so.
Unless they came from one of the Noah's 3 kids.
I mean, it's like, you know, on the one hand, I feel a little bad for them. But at the same time, I'm like, look, they admit outright, yeah, evolution's probably true, but I'm not going to believe it. So it's
or it's true up to a point. Like,
well, they're like, they say, you know, oh, the Bible is true, and the Bible says the Earth is 10,000 years old, which it doesn't. But you know, whatever. So
yeah. So, let's come up on your channel besides the more of the ancestor tale stories.
Let me think. Are we interviewing anybody? I don't think so. I don't think. I do have. Well, I have a potential debate with Otangelo on the 29th, which I know, woe is me. So that maybe he's feeling a little under the weather right now, so we'll see if that debate's still going to be on. Maybe. So that'd be on the 29th on, I think his name is MC Toon, Toon. He does a lot of flat Earth debates apparently, so it'll be hosted on his channel.
So is pro flat?
No, I think he's anti-flat Earth, or okay. He's a realist. We'll say that. You know, I think the Steropodon. Yeah, the Steropodon is actually in the Monotreme group, or in the Prototheria group, or Australosphenida, whichever term you prefer. I don't have a side on it.
You see, you be at the 29th. Do you know what time it is?
January 29th.
Right this time?
Not offhand. I don't remember what time it is.
Okay. Okay, then I might have to reschedule something then, because I was hoping to have you on to talk about the Ordician.
Oh, the Ordovician.
Yeah, but at the same time, I can reschedule that.
Maybe, because we also have to see whenever Colton's available.
Yeah, because of his schedule.
Yeah, but with school, because I know he's in class right now and he's got a bunch of work he's doing.
Yeah. Also, I was watching. I was watching your debate or discussion with Bread of Life on your channel, and then later on when Dapper rebroadcasted it. That most of the things she was saying was like, I thought the topic. Let's stick to the topic, and technically it was the topic, but kind of not. But
yeah, I mean, I made the mistake at first is I sent everyone the wrong paper, which, I mean, that's my bad. But she just kept saying, oh, that's not the topic. That's not the topic. That's not the topic. And it's like, okay, look, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Let's deal with this paper. And she was like, oh, well, I said, you said we were coming here to talk about this. And I was like, let's just get to the paper. My goodness.
I mean, what's kind of refreshing for some creationists that like to go off topic, but also kind of what's the topic at the same time.
And the thing is, she didn't even understand the topic. She did not understand. She kept asking these like basic questions about the paper. She was like, I read it, but I don't understand this. And so we just explained what the paper said, but to her. And then she would be like, oh, okay. And then she'd move on to the next thing and then ask the same question. She did that. We did that for like an hour where we just talked about this paper. And then at the end, she was like, okay. So they figured out it was these genes that were involved in the switch to macroscopic multicellularity. And Dapper and I were like, yes. She goes, okay. But it was just a lab experiment. It wasn't in the wild. We were like, oh my God.
Yeah, and also about brought up the beginning of the point. You're like you agree with this, you agree with this. So why don't you believe in evolution? Like, why don't we talk about that?
Yeah, no. No, and the thing about it was, um, I don't know. I don't know how much of it is a grift to her. Because the thing Dapper asked her, which was very pertinent, which of course she didn't answer, was what would you expect for like to occur in the lab to consider evolution true? And she was like, oh, I prefer not to answer that, or I don't really have an answer, or something like that. But she didn't answer. She dodged the question. And basically at that point, we knew this was going to go south, because without an idea of, if you go into a topic and you're like, I don't believe this thing, and somebody asks you, okay, what would you expect if this thing were true, and you don't have an answer, you have not thought about this topic. And so she was the embodiment of the deer in the headlights look. Yeah, she was. Yeah, absolutely. It was a very frustrating talk. That was one of the most frustrating talks I've had with a creationist like ever.
Even more Nephilim free.
Yeah, I mean, Nephilim Free's an idiot. But just, it was on par with that. I'll say that it was on par with a Nephilim Free chat. But yeah, no, it was a total waste of time. I don't have any intent to like talk to her again about evolution, because there's no point. She's not interested in learning about it, so whatever.
Yeah. Well, besides that, I also once we get Colton his scheduled thing, there's also another thing I'd like to do an episode on in the future, and that's, if we can, and that's wings.
On the convergent evolution of wings in different clades.
Yeah, like we know it can't happen in the insect clade. Then that's different than the pterodactyl clade. Was different than the dinosaur bird clade. Which is different than the bat mammal clade. Which is different than the Sphinx Pegasus clade.
Yeah. Interestingly, birds very close to the birds is a group called the Scansoriopterigids, which is a mouthful. But this clade, I think it's a family, Scansoriopterigidae. They actually developed bat-like wings, or pterosaur-like wings. So they had feathers, but they also had membranous wings, and they're very close to the birds within Maniraptora. Yeah. So very weird. The first member of that, or the first bat-winged Scansoriopterigid was discovered in like 2015. So that gives us hints at a whole ecological system that existed that we now know from like 2 fossils. How many others developed wings like this? We have no idea.
Yeah. I know we'll get more to it when we get the episode, but it's like, if like the Pegasus and the Sphinx had to be true, they had to develop wings like the insects did, almost off their back, and
because they'd have to be, so they have like bird wings, they have theropod wings, right?
Yeah.
But they don't have the shoulder girdle for wings, right? Yeah. So they'd be the first hexapods rather than
I remember you brought up wings in your discussion with her, almost, I think, remember correctly.
At some point we may have, because after we talked to her about the paper, Dapper talked to her for quite a bit, because she said something like, oh, you think mutations are a major factor in evolution? And then Dapper proceeded to give like this laundry list of different mutations and their effects. And then at the end of that, she was just like, well, I just don't believe it.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah. Like when we do that, I like to have Brainbug in here because he is more of the insect expert. But like how I think their wings are, at least from I might be wrong, but they're not connected to any limbs. The insect wings and stuff, they're not really limb connected.
Right. So the tissue for the insect wings. So there were 2 different hypotheses. There was basically there were more than 2, but one of the ideas was like they're outfoldings of the dorsal epidermis, and then another was like they were part of the leg branch, and it turns out it's kind of both. There's
Okay.
like skin or cells from the leg and the back are recruited to make the wings, and so yeah. So it turns out it's a little bit of both in the developmental department.
Yeah. Of all the mythical animals, well, I know that technically rhinos are the unicorns nowadays, but
Mm-hmm.
would be unicorns. I think the only one mythical animals that might could happen because all it is like little like whatever rhinos have on their forehead, so they
Well, that's like a elasmotherium. Elasmotherium has the big horn on its forehead, So that could be the unicorn. Because what is it? I think the white rhino is Diceras unicornis, if I remember correctly.
Is that the one that became extinct recently, or is that another one? Or
I think that was
endangered?
like the western black rhino or something like that,
Okay.
or northern black rhino, one of those. Yeah.
Very recently, I think it was the only surviving male or female in their family.
Yeah, I think it's down to like I think it's two females are basically all that's left, so they're effectively extinct. So
Well, if
yeah.
you can figure out some way to crossbreed them with other rhinos, probably not.
Well, I mean maybe, but it's kind of like what happened with the tortoises and one of the Galapagos tortoises, where they're like one of the subspecies, whatever, went extinct, but it turns out that they also interbred with a different subspecies, so some of their um, genes are preserved. And there was also what is it, the red wolf here in the United States, which sort of crossbred with like gray wolves and whatnot. So there's still some red wolf um, genetic or genes, but they've also been bred with gray wolves, so they're not purely red wolves anymore.
Before we let you go, there's one question. I don't know if you saw David's debate with Kenny
No.
a few days ago. Well, he tried to bring up even, why did not Kent? Well, Kent, he like totally brought the topic off, but he brought up a topic that I didn't really not know. I didn't know about. Well, there are three kinds of natural selection: disruptive,
Stabilizing
directional.
and directional. Yeah.
Yeah, can you talk about those a little bit? Because I didn't even know about that.
Yeah.
And unlike Kenny boy, I'm actually interested.
So yeah, absolutely. We can talk about that. Okay, so natural selection, it is the reproductive differential success of a population, and directional, stabilizing, and disruptive selection refer to the direction the population goes towards a particular set of alleles, so some norm. Directional selection is sort of the easiest to understand. It's basically you have your original phenotype, and then you have a novel allele which arises, and your population drifts towards or gets selected towards that novel phenotype because this new allele is better than the other existing alleles. So you shift sort of unidirectionally towards this new phenotype. So that's directional. It's in like one direction from old phenotype to new phenotype. Okay. So that's sort of the basic one when people normally talk about natural selection. Stabilizing selection is you have a norm, you have a normal phenotype which works very well in a particular environment, and basically any variations from this norm are going to be selected against. So if you are, I don't know, talk about the platypus. If we're talking about the platypus and you're a platypus and you have a mutation which knocks out some of your electroreceptors, well, that's not going to be good for you because you rely on those very heavily for your subsistence. So that's going to be selected against. And then disruptive selection is you have one original phenotype and then you have two novel phenotypes, both of which are selected over the original. And it's let me think of an example. Imagine if you have an original population and they are basically you distribute them over this environment, and within this environment there are sort of micro environments where you have sets of selective pressure or sets of selective pressures that are different. So you have your original, and your population sort of distributes over this particular habitat. And in these areas where you are subject to new pressures, those are going to favor different phenotypes over the original. And so disruptive means you're going from 1 to 2. And this is what happens a lot of times with with cladogenesis. So you have your original species, and then they move to different regions and they undergo different selective pressures, which lead to 2 different species. So that's allopatric speciation. So yeah,
kind of like the language from French, from Latin to French. They went through.
Right. Yeah. It became like it became French, it's Italian, Spanish, Romanian. It went in all these different directions. That's kind of disruptive.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And stabilize that. Would that be kind of like the balance between natural and sexual selection type thing?
Yeah, sort of.
They want to look good for their mate. They also want to not get eaten or something.
Right, exactly. You're trying to hit on a particular norm which accomplishes both, essentially. And so yeah. And then yeah, directional is just new phenotype evolves or appears, and then it sort of outcompetes the others, and they move towards that one.
Like the giraffe of necks and neck of giraffes and the tail feathers of peacocks.
Right, or the peppered moth example. The whole population switched or went from being like very small percent black morphs, very large percent white morphs, to very large percent black morphs, very small percent white morphs. So yeah,
but Jackson, they're still moths.
They are still moths. That is true. But yeah, that's directional selection. But yeah, I mean, look, these are very basic, population genetics ideas, and you're expecting Kent to know them. That's the first problem. So,
well, not just Kent, really. Most of them. At this point.
I mean, Kent's been repeating the same talking points for what, 40 years now, something like that. If it's not, if it wasn't something he learned back in the 1980s, he's not going to use it now. So,
well, for me, coming up next week, I'm having Venerable Bede on to talk about Edward III.
Oh,
yeah. Well, anybody have any questions about monotremes or anything that we talked about? RJ, Pixie, any questions about this topic or the other 2 guests we have in the thing?
Any questions?
Before we say goodbye?
From the peanut gallery? It's cold. It's dropped below freezing where I am.
That's probably it's below freezing where I'm at too, but it's 20 degrees right now.
Dang, it's colder where you are than where I am.
Oh, Brainbug finally showed up.
Brainbug, you missed the show. You'll have to catch up.
Yeah, we're about to wrap it up. Unless you have anything you want to talk about monotremes or insect wings. We talked about monotremes. We talked about insect wings. We talked about how they're different from theropod
if he wants to talk about insect wings, he'll have to be there for the flight show.
Just start over.
Oh, all right. So we're going to talk about monotremes today. That monotreme means no. All right. Well, I had fun. Thank you for having me on as always.
Yeah. The problem, we gotta get together with figure out when Colton's free, and then we gotta do the when you're not debating our good old friend attach. Hopefully, Tommy. Hopefully, your brain's not dead after your intentional debate. We can talk about the ornithischians and the wings later on.
Yeah. That's true. That is true. Yeah. So.
Well, right. You know what you say in the end of your stuff.
All right. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
All right. And as I say, never stop learning. Enjoy the randomness. We'll see you then. Bye.